Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Oxys webinar today about realizing the promise of AI and automation. I'm Fabiana Corredor from the marketing team here at Oxys, and I'm so happy to have our panelists and speakers from both my Oxys team, Eduardo and Bill, as well as our customers and clients, Jerome and Danielle from Coke Beverages Florida and Equifax. As you probably have seen, your lines are muted, but we really would welcome your questions throughout the discussion that you can leave in the question panel. And I'll make sure to, bring the questions at the right time during the session or at the end of the session. We also want to allow some time for Q&A. And we're also going to be issuing some live polling questions, and we're going to be sharing the results with you about your own answers to those polling questions. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bill, who's going to be facilitating the session today.
Awesome. Thank you, Fabi. Really appreciate you joining us today. We have a fantastic panel, and we think a very exciting topic is many companies are struggling, ultimately getting value out of their AI and automation programs. So with that, let's jump into the agenda, as I think you'll find this really interesting. So we'll have some key challenges that companies are facing today and some of the key statistics that we're seeing from the marketplace, just to really bring it to life. And then I think you'll find this very powerful also. It will be a high-level journey for Equifax and Coke Beverages Florida, kind of where they have been, key challenges they faced along the way, and where they're going with the automation program. And then most of the discussion will be structured around a value realization framework. It's essentially the end-to-end blueprint to drive value. So we'll click into 3 stages for that: a discover phase, an automate phase, and an operate phase. And that's where kind of the bulk of the discussion will be today from all of the panelists. And then we'll lean into the future a little bit on agentic and AI and what we see happening next. This is certainly a very exciting time. And then we'll have a Q&A at the very end. So thanks again for joining. I think these are some great topics. And let me highlight some of the key stats that I mentioned. So it's just commonplace, and it has been commonplace, not just from the technology, but based on approach, where organizations are struggling to get value out of their programs. And as you look at some of these key statistics, I'll highlight some of them. So when you look at the upper left, 92% of companies are investing more in AI, but only 1% say they're getting, a return on that investment. You look beside that, 75% of companies have AI as the top investment priority. 3 out of 4 are saying AI is the top priority, but only 1/4 of them are seeing significant value. So there's a little bit of a hype cycle, but certainly so much potential. And if you think about large language models and how much they've evolved, I mean, it's really been widely available for a little bit over 2 years right now, as you think about it that way. So with a wide adoption of those, if you think back 3 to 4 or 5 years ago, the scope of work that can be automated has dramatically transformed. Because I think rolling the clock back, many of the creative type areas or inferring information from content. So understanding the intent of an email or an inquiry or providing a response based on a request. These are new capabilities, and they're moving fast. So we're really excited about this, but it then comes back to making sure there's an understanding of what the potential is and then the value that can be created for that. So a couple more that I'll highlight, the one in the middle bottom, and I do find this surprising. 60% of companies fail to define and monitor any KPIs related to AI and value creation. I do find that shocking. That's just clearly unacceptable. And then on the upper right-hand side, these are responses we had from people who registered for this webinar, and it was around 100 that registered. So not surprisingly, in some of the Oxys experience is that discover phase. So identifying high impact use cases, getting the ROI, improving the business case is the main challenge we're seeing on this. There's also a big challenge on resources, and we're seeing that even more now with some of these AI skills and making sure It's a combination of skills and capacity to get that work done. And then I'll highlight on the very bottom, 52% of organizations see kind of the skilled workers as their biggest barrier in delivering these outcomes. So thought you would find these interesting. So with that, I will shift gears and we will go to our first polling question. The idea for this, the based on prior results for this question, it's a look back into what degree is your organization realized value through intelligent automation and AI.
Thank you, Bill. I have opened the polling question and we have started to get some of the results. I'll leave it open for the next 30 seconds. Please enter your answers and we'll make sure to share.
Oh, it's shifting a little bit. It's shifted a little bit towards moderate and a little bit on high. Well, we've got one on high. We have a
Yeah.
low number of people answering this. So,
Yeah. We have 40% of your votes. So if we can try to get at least 70%, that would be great. I'll share in the next few seconds. But we're getting some
I mean,
more.
yeah, I think this is probably just a
A
good
good
pulse to have in the
representation.
group.
Perfect. So
And
I'll share the results now because I feel that it was just you, Bill, seeing them. But
uh,
yes, we can see here 54% still consider the impact to be minimal and limited, 31% moderate, and only 15% high. Nobody considers themselves to be exceptional.
okay. This isn't surprising, so mostly in the lower end of the scale from an automation and AI standpoint. We wanted to combine those two. Ultimately, for value realization, the discipline and the methods around this are common around both technologies. If we would have asked separately, I'm guessing we probably would have had a lower percent from pure AI, but I think that's a good indication right there. So let's take a look from an Equifax standpoint and from Coca-Cola Beverages Florida. Let's start with Daniel. Tell us a little bit about the scope of your automation program. What are some key challenges you faced along the way, and then changes that you've made?
Thanks, Bill. And welcome everybody to the webinar. We're very happy to be here and share our experience with you all. At Equifax, we've been doing this for the last maybe 7, 8 years. We were one of the early adopters of UiPath by the time. We got to a point in our program that we scaled 550 watts at one point in time, right? It came with its own challenges. In the beginning, we had infrastructure on premise. So how do you scale a program without the proper technology, right? So we overcome that particular challenge, and as we grew, we implemented a federated and a citizen development model as well as part of our capabilities, and we have a program presence in Asia Pacific, Europe, US, Canada, Latam, both COE-driven automations and also from a citizen development and a federated model standpoint. So as Bill said earlier, right, we have pivoted from just deterministic automation, and now we're at a point that we're introducing a more intelligent automation with the new machine learning capabilities that are out there in the market. So it's been a great journey, a lot of learnings, and we have a robust program at Equifax.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. Jerome, tell us a little bit about the Coke Beverages Florida automation program.
Yeah, so thank you, Bill, and good afternoon to everyone that's attending. I would say I would describe our journey is your typical crawl, walk, run journey. We started our automation program late 2019, early 2020. We focused on a lot of the back office functions with the initial RPA activity that we set out to deliver. We were delivering simple RPA, simple workflow solutions. We had really just one platform that we focused on, one service provider that we worked with. And again, we were just trying to get our feet wet. We wanted to establish a COE. We wanted to get down or nail down, I would say, our internal processes. We wanted to develop an internal understanding of what is automation, both within our COE as well as more broadly with our stakeholder group. And as we started to walk, we wanted to establish and utilize more sophisticated platforms that were starting to come into the space, and that were available to us. We've now since expanded the number of partners that help us deliver. We've developed internal capabilities, which is something that we really set out to do, I guess, starting last year. As Daniel mentioned, we established a SIP dev community, but we've also tried to get some of our internal resources up to speed on some of the platforms that we now have in place. We're starting to build more sophisticated RPAs. We're starting to leverage some of the technology that's out there that didn't exist several years ago, or at least technology that has made significant strides, right? Whether it's communications mining, some of the generative AI capabilities, document understanding, things of that nature. And I would say that we're starting to focus more on not just delivering a large volume of automations, but really focusing on the value and the types of automations that we're able to bring to life. And so I think we're starting to hit that run stage. And so it's been a journey. It continues to be a journey. We're continuing to learn. We're continuing to leverage our partners. And at some point, I think we'll be fully running.
Excellent. I think those are slightly different, but fantastic perspectives on starting at a given point and then advancing that program, and continuing ultimately to focus on value creation and driving additional value. So let's see. There we go. So let me introduce a value realization framework here. And this slide is fairly busy. So to start with, let me click in and focus really on the center section right here. As you think about ultimately getting value out of something, we should begin with the end in mind. And that's an old sort of Stephen Covey 7 habits item. But beginning with that end in mind is exceptionally important. It's often stated, but doesn't tend to flow through the full thread of an implementation lifecycle. So with this, it's critical to have a business-led approach and ultimately make sure we're going through a discipline of identifying a large range of opportunities, quantifying, prioritizing, aligning with stakeholders such that we have a healthy implementation backlog. The idea of this is to do this at scale. And so at scale, generally, there's also a need to be able to implement rapidly and to be able to quickly turn these items around with high quality, and ultimately that solution delivering the business value. It's built to deliver that value. And the final one is around operate. And that's actually where we start earning the value. But it doesn't magically happen. There are steps that have to be taken along the way to make sure that that value is earned. So here are kind of the 3 anchor points that we'll drill into. There's a ring that goes around that, and key elements or methods that are also critical for each of the phases to make sure we drive value. So to begin this, we'll first go into discover. And one of the items shown on here is stakeholder engagement, and it's stakeholder engagement at the top and innovation at the bottom. That's really representing it. It covers the full end-to-end life cycle. So with that, why don't we click into stakeholder engagement, and then Jerome, what are some things that you've done to effectively engage stakeholders?
Yeah, Bill, for us in our program, there's probably 4 keys to stakeholder engagement, or at least 4 keys that I think, we've tried to really lock in on. One would be, just education, right? We wanted to make sure that our stakeholders understood what is automation, right? What does it mean? What is it capable of? How does it change what I do today? How does it change my outcomes, my perspectives, things of that nature? I would say the second key for stakeholder engagement for us has been demonstrating possibilities. A lot of our stakeholders, right, they're focused in driving their day-to-day activities and whatever is important for their responsibilities for their desk or their tasks or their jobs. And so really getting their head around what's possible, what's doable, and how does this translate into what I do day in and day out. That's been a real key for engagement. And then thirdly, which is similar to what I just mentioned, it's what I would call connecting the dots. And so obviously our business folks have their day-to-day priorities, but when you talk about what we can deliver, how does that resonate with the work that they do day to day? And so we tried to get them to focus on, for Coke Florida, automation wasn't just about a cost cutting exercise. Even though there's a lot of repetitive tasks that we're eliminating, a lot of redundancy that we're eliminating, we really haven't looked at this exercise in our program as a way to take down headcount. What we tried to educate our stakeholders on is this gives us an opportunity to reallocate our time, our resources, and our energy towards more value added activities, really doing more analytics, right? Really understanding what our customer needs, really focusing on our overall customer experience. And so connecting those dots with the business folks has helped also get them fully engaged in our program. And then last but not least, which is probably one of the things that sometimes gets forgotten, is just successful execution and delivery. And if we said we were going to do something, we wanted to get it done, and we wanted to get it done in a timely manner. We've been able to do all four of those pretty well, and it's helped us really deliver or really lock in on a level of stakeholder engagement that's ensured success for our program. We believe in engagement from a top down as well as a bottoms up perspective. And what I mean by that is we've tried to make sure that our leaders were engaged. They understood the capabilities of our program, what value the program could deliver. But we also wanted the folks that were doing the day-to-day jobs from the bottoms up to also be fully engaged and also have a similar perspective around possibilities. And so as you see on this slide, right, there's several elements around key engagement, and I touched on some of them, but we've tried to do a really good job of identifying opportunities, making sure our stakeholders understand those opportunities, creating workshops, office hours, targeted conversations and communications to help brainstorm and come up with pipeline opportunities. Being clear about how this all was, how it all comes to life, right? What's our framework? What are people's roles and expectations, and how does it fit towards the ultimate delivery? And then again, facilitating the buy-in. I talked a little bit about it, but the communication is so important. We try and over communicate where possible. We create feedback loops whereby we're trying to showcase what we're building very early on so that we can make sure that it aligns with business objectives, business expectations, and so that we don't get too far down the road and deliver something that doesn't meet the needs. And so we want to make sure that, again, we're positioning ourselves and being upfront with progress, with status, with how things look, how things feel, so that we ultimately get to the outcome that everyone is expecting.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jerome. Now, as we go from stakeholder engagement, let's shift gears and actually talk about the funnel, the pipeline, and the key stages for that. So, Eddie, walk us through this pipeline content.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill, and thanks everybody for joining. Eddie here. I'm the Intelligent Automation Managing Director for Oxys. Been working here and supporting organizations such as Coke and Beverage Florida and Equifax through our history. So very excited to be here. And as we're talking about this, naturally, pipeline management is one of those things that a lot of organizations overestimate their ability to effectively manage, maintain, and drive through an organization. So we wanted to spend some time discussing, what are the things that we have worked with our customers and also getting their perspective on what's the best way to do this. I think naturally discovery and finding that wide end of the funnel is key. I think moving from stakeholder engagement, the way that we talked about before, what isn't measured necessarily doesn't exist. And I truly believe that when we talk about doing these workshops and making sure that that wide end of the funnel continues to be fed, it requires a lot of marketing. It requires a lot of understanding what the expectations were, and then making sure that the organization really understands it. It goes away from the anecdotal conversations around productivity gains or anecdotal conversations about did this work or didn't work, to really get down to brass tacks that will enable you to continuously build momentum and drive a lot of demand for the automation program. Naturally, that leads to a lot of potentially unautomatable processes or a lot of opportunities that really won't make sense neither financially, or they won't yield the productivity gains that do make sense. So the right assessment of the opportunities, and the assessment not only includes the just evaluating a process, but also managing a continuous communication with the business around the opportunities. What happened with my idea, and we're going to be talking a little bit more in the next few slides about how to manage that and how to prioritize that in more detail. But really making sure that you're assessing the opportunities as they come by, fairly quickly, fast, and make a high level decision quickly if this is going to be prioritized for now, or if this won't even fall to the bucket of this, and making sure that you also course correct the incoming ideas from the business. This done well creates overwhelming demand. And I think Daniel has gone through that, and Jerome has gone through that. Now, a lot of that demand may not be some of the, even though automatable and even though seem to be a good opportunity for automation, may not be prioritized yet within a program. So making sure that that is done well is key. Going through prioritization, I think a lot of organizations have different ways to prioritize opportunities. There's a lot of organizations that are looking just for cost savings. That really trunks your ability to drive for long-term value, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But really thinking broader, what's driving your need for automation? Is it fast delivery, faster processing, better customer service, better SLAs, making sure that you never break an SLA, confidence in your ability to scale? So there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration as you drive for the key opportunities, and then working really closely to get to the right level of approval and having the right governance structure to really get to a decision fast and quick, and maintain that level of excitement within the organization. So before we move into this one, I thought it would make a lot of sense to get Daniel's and Jerome's feedback. So Danny, how are you assessing the key opportunities? I know at the beginning it was very likely all cost savings, but now that you've done hundreds of automations, you've matured into a different model. So you can tell me how you started and now where you are.
Yeah, so of course, very important, everything related to cost savings or capacity creation, right? Those are two of the key value dimensions that everybody looks at. In our case, right, as you may know, our industry is highly regulated, so we also look at processes that are more related to security, compliance, and then customer satisfaction. And what I mean customer satisfaction are Equifax external customers. So that brings in revenue, right, at the end. So the executive decision on how we approach the pipeline is not strictly only on cost savings per se, but also how do we add value to the company in different areas. Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. Like in Equifax business, I'm sure that automation is all about data management. So being able to provide better products, faster solutions, actually increase your revenue through automation. Awesome.
Yeah. So and we've had scenarios, right, that to your point, we're currently working on a couple that are more product centric. They are adding capabilities to an existing product. So we have shifted our approach, right, to be more business centric. At the beginning was more like back office processes, contact center, but now we're also collaborating with product teams in order to do this type of automations. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. And Jerome, would you want to chime in?
Yeah, so similar to Daniel's story, right? We focused a lot of our automation activity and prioritization early on in our program based on, removing redundancy and repetitive tasks, right? But we've since changed. I shouldn't say changed. We've evolved our thinking, right? as a business, we've grown drastically, both organically and through acquisition over the last several years. And so, one of the things that we've tried to address through automation and through our program is how can we continue to scale our business and not add headcount, right? So, can we do more with the same, right? Or can we even do more with less, right? And automation has allowed us to do that, right? We've been able to take tasks that were taking multiple people or multiple hours, and now we've been able to reduce that. And we've got bots that are running 24/7 that's taking on that same activity, and we've layered on volume. And so that's been a real game changer for us. And so I would say that's probably the biggest shift in thinking around our overall pipeline management.
Great. Thanks so much. So would
Thanks,
you mind
fellas.
moving to the next slide? Okay, go ahead.
I do think in the interest of time, we'll skip past this. Eddie, you started touching on some of the key value factors. As you look at this side, one of the exciting things to be on the consulting side is that client needs vary. And in some cases, it's much more about productivity. As Jerome mentioned, it's much more about scalability and allowing people to focus on higher value activities. So value factors shown on the left are common ones that we see, but ultimately what's important for your organization is to get specific based on your business objectives and key results. How would you rank these value factors? Because ultimately these value factors may end up having one automation, be determined to provide much more value than another automation because it's driving you towards your targeted destination. And then on the other side of this, as you look at the x-axis, there's implementation cost and complexity factors. So that's based on what the solution will take to deliver that business need. And as the cost goes up, there's this general 2x2 that we have here that we want to factor in the cost and the relative amount of value that's being driven through that. So you've probably seen some of these before, but some of the less complex items or the quick wins, not a ton of complexity, significant business value. Then there's some really big projects on the upper right-hand side that those are truly transformational. And I think an important point of looking at this is the ROI itself. There are some cases where we see, a relatively quick look at, what's a payback period? And that can be, in my opinion, somewhat of a myopic threshold. So I think making sure this is looked at, the finance folks like net present value and internal rate of return, having some hurdle rates on that can be a very effective way to identify a mix of opportunities where some may be quick and fast and be on kind of the quick win side, but then you'll have some others that are on the right. They may require that significant investment, but provide a really compelling net present value from the calculation standpoint. That's in the quantification. There's obviously some qualitative benefits as well. So working through that process and then having the right lens on how you look at ROI is very important.
Bill, before
Eddie,
before we move on, I think I wanted to add something also that I think it's critical. A lot of organizations just have a really hard time with this because they evaluate every single opportunity uniquely. They go through this process hundreds of times a year, and they evaluate every opportunity, sometimes even differently, with a different set of lenses. And I think that going through the process and taking the time and investing in having a framework of what a good opportunity means from this different levels of value factors, like if I can get so much ROI, so much ARR, so much net present value, this is a pre-approved opportunity and goes right to the top. If I'm looking to accelerate my SLAs of my order processing or anything that as it relates to revenue by a certain amount of time, that creates immediate value and it's pre-approved regardless of the IRR. So there's a lot of ways that you can pre-build the lenses of how you're going to look your ROI, so that every single time that you're driving from a business case, you're using the same methodology, you're using the same effort, and you're being able to be very objective about what is driven into the pipeline so that by the time you get to your monthly steering committee decision on which opportunities are going to be moved into the pipeline, you're almost just going through the motions, and by being aligned with that, you're just looking at the assumptions and making sure that they're correct and being able to push them forward without making it 5-month long conversation about is this good or bad for the business. I think that's something that I think has provides incredible value to the program as it grows. Just creates efficiency and acceleration of the value of the program.
Let's spend a couple of minutes. UiPath has an automation hub tool as a part of the UiPath platform. There are other tools out there. I would certainly counsel to use a tool to manage opportunities, and don't have too ad hoc of a process to go through this. There should be some structure and definition. And then, Jerome, let me ask you any quick, comments you would like to make about kind of whatever the tool is, but key features you like to see as it relates to managing opportunities.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, Bill. I know we've got more content to cover. Essentially the next two slides I think go hand in hand, and you know, again, going back to our journey, we were essentially using Excel, right? Which there's nothing wrong with Excel, and I know a lot of folks leverage Excel for a lot of different things, but we were managing and using Excel as our central repository, as our means for project and automation tracking, and even trying to figure out how we could build metrics and reporting from the data that we were keeping in Excel around our automation inventory. But there's some challenges around that, right? That's not what Excel was built for. But Automation Hub, as an example, as a UiPath tool, has kind of changed the game for us. It's giving us a central and safe place to house things. It's giving us an entry point for our stakeholders to know where they can go when they have an idea. That was always a concern or a question, right? Do I call someone? Do I send an email? Is it a help desk ticket? Well, now it's a one-stop shop for us. It also allows us to provide a level of visibility to our automation inventory, both from a pipeline management as well as a value realization standpoint. We didn't have that level of visibility, right? We're starting to open up Automation Hub to a broader community, or a broader set of folks, I should say, within our community, whether it's leaders and even folks that are coming up with ideas, so that we can be transparent about what our pipeline looks like, what our prioritization, as well as, again, how are we delivering relative to the objectives that we've set on the front end of either our business plan and or our program related to automation. And then again, on the second slide, it really covers a lot of what I talked about on the next one, Bill, that we've been able to add key inputs into Automation Hub, which gives us the visuals and the metrics that resonate with our leaders on the back end. So we can clearly articulate the success of our program, or even where we're having challenges. And it's based on, it's substantiated with fact-based data, if you will. So we've been able to improve our time to value because now we have more meaningful ways to track it. We know what's going into the work, and so we know what we're getting out of it in a much more clear and transparent way. And with the help of Oxys, who's obviously is our key partner along our current journey, they've implemented Automation Hub along with UiPath with us, and they've been a key partner and I would say a key ingredient to the success that we've had, and with some of the improvements that we've seen, and Automation Hub is a big part of that.
Excellent. Thank you, Jerome. Let's jump to, we have two polling questions here. So the first one is, tell us about your automation backlog versus capacity to deliver. So do you have too much backlog for your capacity? Or are you kind of on point and on track to deliver the backlog on time with the capacity you have? Do you not have enough backlog and you need more capacity? And in some cases, it may not be formal backlog. I mean, as you're thinking about this, these could be opportunities that you think can drive value to the business. And then the final variation is, it's not really a capacity issue, but there are some skill gaps.
Thank you, Bill. And you can select more than one option, right? As you may do one of the first three and then still have the fourth issue about the lack of skills. We have 20% of your votes, and we'll give it a couple of more seconds to try to get at least half of your votes. Waiting for some more. We're at 40%. Let's get some more. And yeah, so let's share. As you guys can see, actually, this is a better problem to have than the extra capacity. So it seems that 60% are struggling with too much backlog for current capacity, 10% on track to deliver, 20% not enough backlog and extra capacity, and 10% capacity is not the issue, but the skills.
And I tell you, I've seen to some extent also, I think this is interesting that there's too much backlog. I think there's also a little bit of throttling back some of the stakeholder engagement. So there's possibly even more backlog if the aspiration were larger. So interesting to see that first one that was selected there. Let's jump one more polling question. We can get through these quickly. So tell us about how you're implementing. We're going to shift into design, build, and test that phase. How are you implementing those automation and AI solutions? Are you doing those in-house? And if in-house, are they working well or not so well? Or are you also using partners and that's working well or not meeting expectations?
Thanks for participating. This will also allow us to understand a bit more where does the audience sit as we go through the next few sections of the webinar.
Yeah, I have 30% of the votes, and we'll give it a couple of more seconds. All right. So
Okay. Survey says?
yeah, so 38% are in-house and working well, 25% in-house but not meeting expectations, 25% with partners working well, and 13% with partners not meeting expectations.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now we're going to shift to go into the design and build component of this. So with that, we will shift gears, and Daniel, tell us a little bit as you go from pipeline to delivery and some key aspects and how you manage that and close gaps.
Yeah, so I think the previous poll was very accurate, right? Seems like the transition from pilot to delivery is always it's not as a smooth transition, right? So when we start generating pipeline, we start engaging top management and also our teams and SMEs in the process, and they see the value that the automations can do and how much free time we're going to have going forward to do fun stuff, not submitting invoices or things like that. Generates a lot of excitement, right? And people bring a lot of ideas. But without having the right planning, tool set, scaling the program, is going to become a challenge. So having a structured approach, as also Eddie mentioned before, how we're collecting those ideas, can help us turning those into a successful automations that add business value towards the end. In our particular experience, we identify four key areas, the ones you can see here in the slides, to ensure that we can scale successfully, right? So how we can have governance so we don't control growth, proper management of this code. How do we use emerging technologies to address automations that 7 years ago, or 8, were not feasible? And also ensuring that we have the right resource allocation. So part of these lessons that we learn is how, or the reason why we shaped our automation program and we have a successful program today. So at the end of the day, a good automation is not only um, a good technical implementation, but also how do we align this to key business objectives top down, so we know that our program is really adding value, not only at a low level, but also at a high level from the overall uh, vision of the company. Um, so when we do automation right, it becomes a strategic driver to the enterprise, and in our case, we've seen that from our leadership. Every time that they need to approach a new problem, it's like, okay, can we go automation first? What's in my toolset to automate? So that pipeline prioritization process and ensuring, that we have the right team in place is key. Also, we tend to do things in house as well, but having good partners like Oxys also help us delivering that value because our teams, they can grow too much. We don't have unlimited resources, so always keeping, good partners is good, to meet the pipeline expectations and adding business value.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. I think all of these, probably many of you on the call are quite familiar with these, and especially around some of the complex use cases and the evolving technology, making sure your resources or the capacity that's delivering that is able to do so effectively. And then, understanding the aspiration and is there sufficient capacity to go after what will really ultimately drive value. So thanks, Daniel. I'll only spend a short period of time on this in the interest of time. Something that is very important though is within the design phase is to have a thoughtful design and to make sure it's considering and aligning with the business case. So there can be key elements on the business case that are shown on the right, but ultimately the workshops, engaging SMEs, understanding the current state and designing the future state needs to respect what the target business case is. It needs to solve for that. So that's a key part of doing this well. Another aspect of the thoughtful designs is if you do that correctly up front, that pays dividends after that. Or said another way, if you don't have a very good design up front, it tends to lead to more scope creep, it leads to more delays, it leads to more rework and more timelines. So wanted to spend a moment on this. Ultimately, as we think about this is just a click into, the delivery aspect and implementation, but making sure you're addressing those challenges and then designing to meet desired outcomes is super important. So wanted to spend a minute on that. In the interest of time, I will go ahead and flip over to the operate section. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where we have bots in production. This is where, based on the changes we said we wanted to make, we're making those changes. How will the benefit show up on the P&L? It's that type of thing. How will we make sure that the bots continue running? So we have a couple of interesting topics here. And with that, I will hand it back over to Daniel.
Yeah. So everything that we have said the last 40 minutes, all theory, right until now. So if the bots, they don't produce the desired outcome, right? Definitely, it's gonna create a loss of momentum in your program, right? So some observations from working with the bots for the last 7 years. I think Bill touched on, having a good design, ensuring that, the solution works fine. That's one of the things that we have seen. How do we use reusable components? How do we have infrastructure that we can scale? So in the past, we talked a lot about digital workforce management and now shifting our focus to more like a digital approach. So if I need to add 10 more digital workers to my workforce, do I have the infrastructure to do it, or I can't because I don't have the necessary tools? Very important. meet all your regulatory requirements, do what's right for your company. At Equifax, we have one value, and it's do the right thing. So we gotta ensure that we're in compliance from a security and privacy point of view. Then having your bots uh, being monitored automatically. So you don't have your stakeholder knocking on your door the day after, hey, by the way, what happened? I have a backlog of 500 cases that the bots haven't processed, but also adds value. And then towards the end, um, being very transparent with the stakeholders, um, having that mechanism where you can hand over processes seamlessly to the manual flow, and make sure that you share your program metrics and you're being very transparent of what the bots are delivering, chargebacks and business case realization. That's going to get your stakeholders happy, and they will go back to you to implement more bots. So that's been a little bit of our experience, right? It's easier said than done. And I guess a few you hit a few roadblocks during this path, but ensuring that your bots are stable, that's critical piece of the automation program.
Excellent. The proactive monitoring is exceptionally important to have those early warning indications. Another aspect of this is there are some cases we see of clients attempting to use the same resources for development as they do for support, and that can
Mhm.
introduce a number of challenges as well. So especially, thinking from a scaling standpoint, it definitely is best practice to have a separate operations group. Think of that as a managed service. There will be some automations. There should be some automations that require 24 by 7 support, and that's a good thing because it's driving value for the business. So there has to be that capability to do proactive work. But if something does happen, that there's a team responsible for resolving that and resolving that in a timely manner.
I would say to add a little bit more, I think it's very interesting in our, in all of our years of working with organizations that this is the most overlooked, underinvested section of a program. And everything
Mhm.
that we have said really drives that there's no value until these automations are in production. So I think Danny was like spot on. Uh, and that being said, I also want to make sure that people understand, you do want to have a segregated organization of support once you get to scale. It may not be needed if you have one or two or three automations. And to be honest, if that's the goal, it's going to be a very difficult, viable program to just continue to scale. But as you get into 20, 25, then you start to feel a lot of the pain. You get a lot of scalability problems. The business starts to question, even if I can give you more, like it starts cracking. So I think it's an important topic to discuss, around the automation, being proactive, making sure that like the program knows before the business knows, just buys you so much credibility, buys you so much, equity in the program, and being able to really scale it from there. You want to make sure that you don't get to the point where things are breaking for you to start thinking about these issues, because they're coming, and it's one of the things that we see most organizations that were doing incredibly well to crumble and stifle growth within their programs.
Excellent. We touched up front about the quantification as a part of prioritization of the opportunities. Once these are in production, it's also critical to make sure you're leveraging technology. So tracking progress and measuring progress against objectives is not an ad hoc Excel activity and done in an unstructured way. This is this is potentially exceptionally powerful, and then to make sure there's a mechanism to manage the data and to make sure targeted outcomes are being realized is extremely important. We're running a little bit over on time. Jerome, I'm curious if you have any quick additional comments to make about this.
Yeah, I'll be very quick, Bill. So you talked about Excel and it being an unstructured way. Well, that was the life we were living And I know I've mentioned that previously, right, as part of our journey. And we're just starting to leverage insights, but we clearly see and can understand the value. The ability to take some key data points as your inputs and then translate that into meaningful reporting and metrics on the back end. I mean, that really is the secret sauce. Um, and so we've had some of that information, but not to the extent that Insights provides for us. What it really does, and this is my last point, Bill, is it gives us the ability and it gives us information. Whereas if we need to reshape or recalibrate our program, right, we've got quantifiable data to point to that tells us that, right? And an example might be the expansion of development resources because we're not getting the time to value that's expected, or if we need to rethink our pipeline prioritization and make adjustments accordingly, right? Because again, we're not seeing the anticipated value metrics that we were hoping out of our program at a certain point in the year. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, the tool itself, it's just another piece of the UiPath platform that's allowed our program to go to another level.
Excellent. I'll only spend a very short period of time on this, but one thing I would say is I highly recommend that you're intentional about how work is changing with this new model. I mean, as you think about that, we'd seen some clients we started working with and they implemented bots, but people were sort of doing the same thing or didn't know what they should do differently. So you're probably familiar with it, but two things I can't emphasize enough. One is a future state RACI matrix, like who should be doing what, and then bringing clarity on, what are the changes? So for a given role, what should you do differently? And a very simple, very effective way to do that is, let's say you have a group of processors and it's a certain pool of team members, and they're used to doing things a certain way. You say, for that group, you should stop doing these set of things. You should start doing this other set of things, and those should be higher value, more exception related, and continue doing a set of things. That should be abundantly clear. So ultimately, there are actions that have to be taken to make sure that we're earning that business case, and handling the change management aspect is also often kind of underserved as a part of that process. So with that, we have about 7 minutes left. Want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So I'll make a couple of comments here, then certainly open it up to the panel. But we are living in very interesting times right now. When we look at the amazing growth of AI, the amount of investment that's going into AI, the possibilities, to Jerome's comments, the possibilities are changing. So an important part when we talk about linking to business objectives is this inform of what the possibilities are. So we make sure that the organization is taking full advantage of those. Many business leaders, many functional leaders, they're not necessarily current on all of these possibilities. So it's incumbent on us to make sure they're aware. That leads for revised business goals, whole new business models. So it really opens up a new world and it's moving fast. What I would say about agentic, and you've probably heard about agentic a little bit, but it's these agents and it's using the power of machine learning and models where it can handle more variation in processes. Because typically, as you're going through a process through traditional RPA, it has to be, very procedural. What are the rules associated to that? With agentic, it will be able to learn over time and will be able to handle more variation. What does this mean? It means ultimately that the scope of work that can be automated will continue to expand. You have the base sort of intelligent automation, you have AI skills available now, and there will be a whole new wave on top of this. So the possibilities in front of us are truly exciting. Let me open it up to the panel for any additional comments about what's next.
Yeah, at least at Equifax, right, we're looking at the agentic automation, having the ability to tap into different sources of data, knowledge base, articles, warehouses, stuff like that. And then with the GenAI capabilities to have more robust processes and speed up some of the business operations. So I think there's going to be a lot of focus for us during this year.
And I would say, I'm sorry,
Go
Kurt.
ahead. Go ahead, Jerome. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say quickly, from our perspective, we're pretty bullish on agentic AI. I think um, the proof will be in the pudding, and we'll see how it comes to life. We're currently working on a couple of different proof of concepts around agentic AI. We are starting small with it and then looking to see how it works, how it is received by our stakeholders. But conceptually, right, it makes sense, right? Especially for us, right? If we can um, reallocate some of that decision making to an agent, and then that agent is able to then allocate processes and automations to other bots. We're very bullish on that concept. But like I said, we're still in the very early stages, and we know working with UiPath, they're still trying to figure it out, as well as they're still trying to figure out how to even price it, right? How do they commercialize it? So we'll see what happens, but we're excited about the opportunities, and we're already getting started trying to figure out how to leverage it.
And I would add, it's a very exciting technology. I was during Forward, they were really cooking their ideas. I think they knew where they wanted to go, but now it's becoming real. Their ability to really provide, and the idea is not to create a huge agent that is going to do 100 different things. It's create small agents that can do very well a group of tasks. And you're going to find that you're going to have Salesforce and ServiceNow and every single organization start to build their own versions of agents, but the ability of UiPath and the uniqueness of UiPath to be able to build your own agents with the context grounding, with the right documentation, being able to test the outcomes of the agent with real world solutions, and your ability to say, this is the information that I expect, here's a sample documentation, here's what I wanted you to get out, and then be able to evaluate against it is going to be incredibly powerful, because you're going to be able to build very easily and extremely fast agents that will be able to do activities that before would have taken you hundreds of hours of development to achieve, and the ability to really integrate those with existing automations is really exciting for us as a partner of our ability to drive value to our customers. So I think 6 months to come, to your comment, Jerome, they found now an understanding of how they're going to price it, and it's going to be general availability in the next 30 days. So it's very exciting. It's those things that I thought it was going to take longer, and everybody thought it was going to take longer, but they started to figure it out very early. Naturally, there's going to be a first generation of the solution, and it's going to continue to just exponentially improve as we get more use cases and things in production. So very excited about that.
Excellent.
So
Was there one additional slide, Fabi?
Well, there's a little bit about our upcoming webinar. Basically, we're going to be hosting a webinar on Wednesday, March 5th. It's going to be about a different topic, but it's still a relevant topic for automation, because from a delivery perspective, right, a lot of your automation support teams could either be located in the US, offshore in India or the Philippines or Europe, or they could be located in Latin America. So we're going to be talking a lot about the trends of nearshoring for supporting North America as a better alternative, or as an additional alternative to the traditional Asian model. And we hope you can join us. So that's the QR code to join the call. And I had a few questions, Bill, and I know we are almost out of time. So I responded in private to some of the people. They were related to test automation, on the operational part of it. How much are you guys implementing test automation for supporting the robots? But there was one that I found really interesting, which was about budget. How do you go about getting budgets approved every year? I'm having a hard time justifying my budget incremental request compared to last year as a percentage, even though that the business value is there. So
I would say if you're achieving the business results and you can quantify the results and demonstrate those, that's sort of like the proof is in the pudding. And maybe there has to be some education on what has been achieved, how that's been achieved, and some of these new possibilities to get these budget owners kind of excited about funding these. And they should see it. It is a budgeting discussion, but they should see it as new opportunities that can transform how they're operating. And I think positioning that way is very important, and also helping them appreciate the fact that with these rapidly evolving technologies, yes, there's some hype, but there's a lot of reality to it. And the status quo is becoming an even riskier proposition. So that may have worked in times before, but I think that recipe could lead to falling behind very quickly.
Thank you. Any last thoughts from Jerome or Danielle?
You know, I would say enjoy the journey, and it is a journey, right? I would also embrace the fact that the technology changes around the space very rapidly, and so be prepared for that. And I think when this time last year we were talking about another hot topic, and now the hot topic is agentic AI, and so I think don't get frustrated with that. Actually embrace it. And understand that that's part of the automation journey, and just continue to evolve and be flexible with it. So,
Yeah.
And Jerome, thank you for joining this. Daniel had a hard stop at 1 o'clock, so he had to jump off. I'll thank him as well. Certainly appreciate everyone who attended this today. It's irrespective of the technology. This is a super important topic, important discipline, and we hope that you found it informational. Thanks
Yeah, thank
again.
you so much.
Thank everybody for joining. Thanks,
Thank you.
Jerome.